In a quiet corner of medieval Italy, in the bustling town of Assisi, a young woman named Clare was born into nobility. She had every privilege, every comfort, every path to a secure life laid before her. But her soul burned for something more, not for wealth, not for prestige, but for God, and for the freedom that only love can give. Clare was born in 1194, just a few years after another child of Assisi, Francis, came into the world. While Clare was being raised in a noble household, Francis was living the wild and carefree life of a wealthy merchant's son. But something was happening in both their hearts, a hunger for meaning, a call to live differently, to give everything to Christ. Clare was deeply religious from childhood. She prayed often, fasted secretly, and gave alms to the poor. Her family expected her to marry, as was the custom for girls of her status. But Clare had already fallen in love not with any nobleman, but with the crucified Christ. When she heard Francis preach, her soul leapt. Here was a man who had renounced everything, literally stripped himself of his possessions to follow Jesus in poverty, humility, and radical joy. Clare knew in that moment that she had found her path. On Palm Sunday in the year 1212, at the age of 18, Clare left her home in secret, slipping through the darkened streets of Assisi. She went to the small chapel of the Portiuncula, where Francis and his brothers were waiting. There, in a quiet and sacred ceremony, Clare laid down her fine garments and put on a simple tunic. She cut her long, golden hair, a sign to the world that she belonged to no one but Christ. Her family was outraged. They tried to drag her back, but Clare clung to the altar and refused to leave. Her heart was resolute. She had found her bridegroom, and nothing, not family, not fear, not the comforts of the world, could separate her from him. Soon, other women came, her sister Agnes, and eventually many others. Together, they formed a new community, the Poor Ladies of San Damiano, later known as the Poor Clares. They lived in a small, humble convent, in silence, prayer, fasting, and joyful simplicity. But don't be fooled by the word poor. These women were rich in the things of heaven. Their poverty was not misery, it was freedom. They owned nothing, but possessed everything in Christ. They renounced power, but became powerful in prayer. They left the world, yet changed it by their example. Clare became the abbess, but she was never above her sisters. She washed their feet, served their meals, tended the sick. Her leadership was gentle, but unwavering. She insisted on absolute poverty, refusing to accept endowments or property, even when the Pope himself encouraged her to relax the rules. Her reply was simple: I desire to be absolved from the obligation of being absolved from the obligation of following Christ. In other words, she wanted no escape clause, no loopholes, just the gospel, raw, demanding, and beautiful. Clare's life was marked by miracles too. Once, when the convent was under attack by Saracen mercenaries, Clare, sick and bedridden, had the Blessed Sacrament brought to the window. She raised it high, praying for protection. The attackers fled in terror. Another time, during a severe illness, she couldn't attend Mass, but God granted her a vision of the liturgy projected on her wall, the first recorded Eucharistic live stream, as some joke today. But Clare didn't live for signs. She lived for love. Her deepest desire was to be united with Christ, to gaze upon him constantly, to mirror his humility and trust. She wrote letters to encourage others, especially Saint Agnes of Prague, urging her to cling to Christ, whose beauty is more radiant than the sun, and whose love is more tender than any earthly joy. Clare suffered much illness, pain, opposition, yet she bore it all with peace. Her union with God was so deep that near the end of her life, she told her sisters, "Go forth in peace, for you have followed the good road. Go in peace, and may he who created you sanctify you, and always be with you." She died in 1253, just 2 days after receiving final approval for her rule of life from Pope Innocent IV, a rule that enshrined the radical poverty she had always lived. It was the first monastic rule written by a woman, approved by the Church. Today, Clare is the patroness of television and screens, fitting for a woman whose vision was so clear, who saw not with the eyes of the world, but with the eyes of the heart. Her life is a quiet revolution, a reminder that strength comes not from domination, but from surrender. That joy is found not in accumulation, but in emptying ourselves for others. And that true beauty is not adorned with gold or jewels, but with the love of Christ reflected in a pure soul. Saint Clare's legacy lives on in thousands of Poor Clares around the world, women hidden from view, but mighty in intercession, Her courage continues to inspire anyone who longs for a simpler life, a purer heart, a deeper love. In a world of noise, Clare invites us to silence. In a world of distraction, she calls us to contemplation. In a world chasing power and prestige, she shows us the power of letting go. Let us walk with her, not in fear, but in faith. Let us learn, as she did, to gaze, consider, contemplate, and imitate the one who became poor, so we might become rich in grace. Saint Clare of Assisi, pray for us.